Welcome to the Circular Economy Show, and welcome to the third episode of our trilogy on food and food redesign. In our previous episodes, we've explored the Foundation's latest publication, The Big Food Redesign, and we've had some fun in the kitchen and at the farm in Farm Ed last week. This week, we're diving in a little more deeply into the role food manufacturers and retailers can play in leading this big shift that we've been talking about. Later on, we'll hear from Karen Cooper from Nestle. We'll be exploring regenerative agriculture in action. But first, I recently had the chance to talk to Gabriella Hernandez Galindo from Danone's marketing team. She was talking to me about how they try to empower their brands around this topic and why Danone is viewing this as a significant business opportunity. Gabby, thanks so much for joining us on the Circular Economy Show. I wanted to kick off whether you could just give our audience a bit of an insight into your kind of journey. How did you get in, what inspired you to get to the role you're occupying today?
Hi, Seb. First, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited for this conversation. So a little bit about myself. I'm Mexican, originally from Mexico City. I'm an engineer by training, and I actually started my career in marketing. And in a way, I joined Danone over 10 years ago in a pure marketing role. And after navigating different brand roles across Latin America, I landed into a particular brand that was a kids' beverage portfolio with a mission to actually get more kids to drink plain, simple water, which sounds like a very obvious thing, especially for people in Europe where safe drinking water is accessible. And, there's a lot more education about health and nutrition. But actually, I realized within this role that one, we have the highest, we're the number one country in terms of childhood obesity. And a lot of it has to do with what kids are drinking. So we have the highest incidence of intake of sugary beverages. And I realized that by doing something with this brand and driving, making water exciting and enticing and driving behavior change, I could have a real positive impact. I partnered with different organizations and NGOs to find ways to, change this at the system level with education, setting up access to safe drinking water in schools, bringing an educational program to get kids and moms to want to drink water. And I realized that after this role, I just couldn't go back to any other brand and do traditional marketing. So at that point, this was 2013, I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And I want to know more and really learn how I can have an impact. And I was always a firm believer in business as a force for good and for change. So I went to business school, focusing on social innovation, passed by a nonprofit working on social innovation, again, in bringing safe drinking water and sanitation to urban populations in Africa and Bangladesh. And at the time when I was having this role, I got called back to Danone. And they said, look, we're looking for someone that has strong business marketing background, but also knows sustainability and social impact to drive our sustainability agenda within the business and strategy community in Danone. And so that was 5 years ago almost that I moved to Paris to the headquarters. And I started this work within the water division first. And now I'm overseeing sustainability within the dairy and plant-based business unit.
One of the things that we talk about in that publication, Big Food Redesign, is the role of iconic products, because that feels like one of the spaces that almost any, because there are cost implications, right, to changing your entire product portfolio. Yes. There are lots of, and we'll talk about some of the challenges and barriers in a bit, but one of the opportunities is to almost create these products that give you a kind of communication point with the end customer, consumer of the product, but also with the rest of the organization, I guess.
I cannot agree more. And I actually love that you mentioned the iconic products in the report. And we actually have, internally we call them manifesto SKUs or manifesto ranges, because we realized they were very important for a number of reasons, these iconic products. On one side, it opens up people in the organization to the possibilities of what can be done in maybe a safer test and learn approach. It also enables food designers, as you call them, or marketeers in the R&I department to be bolder and more creative in rethinking and showcasing the potential of circular food for consumers and customers. And I guess by doing so, you start small, but you're also creating the future demand for diverse, maybe sometimes unknown ingredients, or the way in which products and ingredients are sourced in a better, more regenerative way that allows the rest of the portfolio to eventually follow. I'll give you an example. As you said, many of these things stem from individual stories and examples and smaller brands or iconic products. And I really like one of the examples from our North American brand, Too Good, which launched only last year, an innovation called Good Safe, which is using verified, rescued, upcycled fruits within the product. So actually marketed and communicated as such and verified. In terms of impact, this innovation has managed to save and rescue close to 100,000 pounds of lemons and pumpkins. From the business side, very promising results. The lemon flavor has a highest rotation in Target. And what's also super exciting is it's been awarded very recently a very prestigious innovation award. So on that side, you're showing that it's real. You're showing that it can work, that it can have business success. And we're now actually, the Too Good brand has recently been launched in Australia, and we're now exploring the expansion into other markets. So it's quite a promising, very concrete example from a brand that is also, starting to innovate within these more iconic and circular design products.
Clearly, there are this kind of movement of redesigning our food, supporting regenerative agriculture, having positive impacts on the climate. There are lots of benefits, but of course, Danone, of course, are invested in this as a business, and therefore, I've heard many people from Danone speak about it as a business opportunity. But is the kind of nuance that you're describing there is, yes, it is a business opportunity, but it's not always easy to measure what that business opportunity is, because the current metrics probably measure it more on the 12 to 18 month cycles that you were just describing.
Absolutely. I think you've nailed it there. And we need new metrics, and we need also ways to show that, how do we calculate these intrinsic things or the externalities in a better way within the P&L and within the time frame that is very different, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned before.
Yeah, we were talking obviously before this conversation, Gabby, and you said something that kind of fascinated me, which is that many of Danone's brands have very established stories, having been around for decades, hundreds of years, some of them. How hard is it to change that story in the context of the kind of regenerative commitments, doing more good in the world, circular economy, climate positive?
It's pretty hard, because in a way, these brands were born with a certain positioning, certain storytelling. They are known, perceived for being one thing or two things that don't necessarily incorporate this, because indeed they were born 100 years ago. So if we don't incorporate this storytelling with key proof points, with the right partners to bring credibility, with the right storytelling and the right use of touch points in media, actually it can go really wrong, because it's like you're talking about X for 100 years and out of the blue, you start to talk about Y. So even if you do that, if you are, even if that's true, if you don't do it in the right way, the first reaction of people and your consumers will be like, okay, what is this? Why is this brand talking to me about something completely different? So it's really important actually to bridge the two and to work on a journey to move and shift that positioning, to start to do first. So we talk a lot about story doing, and then couple that with storytelling, and always with really clear projects, clear ambition, and strong external partners to vouch for the work that you're doing.
It feels like that story, that reconnection of ourselves to our food and the people who are responsible for growing our food or creating our food is part of that new cross-value chain perspective that marries what customers are kind of looking for or wanting to understand with the values of this new kind of food redesign economy.
Maybe I will quote a research that we commissioned very recently with Futera and Bloom, where we analyzed over 225 million online conversations about food. to understand exactly, what are people talking about? What's this connection with food and other things? And we realized that actually stemming from the pandemic, we saw the conversation about the people behind the food to soar to the top. We realized consumers and people stepping up and wanting to support small, vulnerable food producers, being more connected to where the food is coming from, how it was produced, supporting local communities as well, local retailers, and realizing that whether they are near or far, the people who produce our food should be valued and supported, which is not always the case, and should be seen as environmental stewards, and also people that are, in the end, the providers of the essential nutrients that underpin our health and everyday lives. At Danone, we have been for many years really close to our sourcing. We have, and we buy our milk directly from over 58,000 dairy farmers that are located around 300 kilometers, around our factories. And we have, on one side, the magic happens when you connect and you bridge between these farmers and the people that are driving the food transformation on the ground. And on the other side, the consumers through stories and innovation and the projects that we have happening. For instance, our Danone yogurt brand has made different collaborations around the world and actually working on many projects with our farmers around, for example, in Spain, in Romania, in France. And in particular, there's a project that is close to my heart because it's actually in Mexico, where we've been working for over 10 years on a project called Project Margarita. And I think what's really interesting is in Mexico, there's actually a milk deficit. Mexico is the second largest milk powder importer in the world. So actually, there's a real big need to work in actually strengthening that supply of milk and working directly with the farmers. And we've been for 10 years incorporating regenerative agriculture practices with over 500 small-scale producers. By doing so, we've helped reduce carbon emissions, better the soil, water management, and actually increase their revenue by tripled the farmers' revenues. And the reality is we never communicated. We had this project for 10 years, and it's a really interesting and really beautiful story. And only last year did we actually say, okay, people want to know about these farmers. They want to know what we're doing with them. And so the Danone brand started to build the connection and integrating this project into the communication and brought it to life with a Danone yogurt called Leche de Origen, so milk from the origins. And it's basically telling all these stories, talking about all the impact in a very simple, concise way, intangible through our product. And I just remember when I first saw the report that you guys just released, I love how you're making that connection very real. You have examples of products and innovations and storytelling. And so in a way, you're helping also people that read the report, and especially, brand owners or food designers to see the possibilities in connecting, that value chain, that the people behind the food and the farmers who in a way are going to make the transformation with the end buyer.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Circular Economy Show. It was fascinating to hear Gabriella there talking about how telling the story of a farmer is an opportunity, but also a challenge for some of Danone's much more established, decade-old brands. But what are we talking about when we talk about regenerative agriculture? Well, my colleague Rob has been exploring some of the stories the Foundation has told over the last 5 years.
The way we grow and produce our food is one of the largest contributors to the climate crisis and biodiversity loss today. But it doesn't have to be this way. There are already many examples of farmers around the world who are growing nature-positive food that regenerates vital ecosystems, rebuilds biodiversity, and captures carbon. But what does this actually look like in practice? Here is a snapshot of just 4 stories of farming that creates nature-positive food in action. We start in Kenya on the land of Farmer Max, where livestock are not only grown for produce, but used as a tool to deliberately regenerate and revitalise the soil.
On the broiler pasture, we have a small dairy herd that we move about 10 days in front of the chickens. And they graze the grass down to about 6 inches. The patties are full of natural protein by the time the chickens graze over them, so it further substitutes their feed in terms of natural protein that they are able to forage and peck at on the ground. What they poop out is our resource for the soil. Their poop is high in nitrogen. They are fertilizing the soil. We are trying to rebuild ecosystem health, and it's effective. And then behind the chickens are the sheep that come in, who also maintain a sort of level of pasture where we want it for the broilers. In other poultry operations, the poop is a burden, whereas for us, it's a tool to regenerate soil.
For our next story, we're staying in Africa. Tamalu Farms is an example of agroforestry, the practice of either doing forestry in agricultural systems or agriculture in forests. This farming method is especially valuable in enabling farmers to create greater resilience with a diverse portfolio of products.
So if you can imagine in a natural forest, you've got lots of different levels. You've got your canopy crops, you've got your emergent above that, you've got your sub-canopy, and then you've got your ground level stuff. In some circumstances, you've even got stuff growing under the ground. And that's what we're strongly mimicking in a system like this. In syntropic agroforestry, everything is planted at the same time, be it from seed or from seedling.
You start planting trees and other crops that begin to grow slowly and helping each other. Fast growers begin to diversify the system and produce food at the onset of the systems.
So you've got a continuously self-propagating family of plants that build the soil for you.
It should be clear by now that this is fundamentally about adopting a different mindset, how to work with nature versus trying to bend it to our will. After spending a lot of time in the forest as a young man, one farmer who is deeply inspired by the way nature works is Leontino Balbo Jr. His experiences encouraged him to completely transform how his family farm was run, removing the use of fertilizers and pesticides, deliberately encouraging increased biodiversity, and focusing intensely on the health of his land's soil. Needless to say, it has paid off. Balbo Jr.'s farm is the largest exporter of organic sugarcane globally, delivering higher yields at lower costs than before.
Ecosystem revitalizing agriculture is an agriculture which at the same time provide all conditions for the crop growth with no problems with plagues, diseases, but at the same time providing to the environment the most important environmental services like preserving the water, improving and keeping soil fertility, bringing back the fauna, biodiversity, and absorbing carbon from other activities of the economy. One of the most interesting results of the application of the revitalizing agriculture is the radical change of the soil structure. It was recovered in such good level, high level, that the soils are even reaching a soil fertility class higher than there were before man started disturbing the environment. This is a structure, naturally structure, rich soil. And it retains 4 times more water than a conventional soil, in a way that we produce 20% more of the conventional production without any irrigation. And the best thing is this soil helps the water life cycle.
Finally, this isn't a story of the land only. There's also potential to restore and regenerate our oceans. Bren Smith has developed a farming method that he calls 3D ocean farming.
So the farm, all it is, imagine a sort of simple scaffolding system underwater where you have hurricane-proof anchors on the edges, and then just about 8 feet below the surface you have a horizontal rope. And so we'll have our kelp growing vertically down on the lines next to scallops and lantern nets, next to mussels and mussel socks, and then below the surface we have our oysters in cages and clams down in the mud.
From Africa to Brazil to our story off the coast of Long Island in the US, the evidence is that we know it is possible to produce our food in a way that rebuilds biodiversity and tackles climate change. Our ability to innovate and to farm more effectively is not the restriction. To move from talking about stories like these as pioneering to a world where nature-positive food is the norm, we need better food design led by the world's largest food manufacturers and retailers and enabled by the right policy incentives and regulations.
So our ability to innovate with our farming methods is clearly not the problem. Let's hear from another large business now in Nestle. I had a chance to talk to Karen Cooper, and she was talking about how Nestle's big commitments on regenerative agriculture and climate positive impact are impacting the way they design their product portfolio. Karen, thanks so much for joining us on the Circular Economy show. To get us started, I wonder if you could sort of tell us almost your 90-second comic book origin story. How did you get to where you are today?
That's a great way of putting it. Okay, so my current role is the R&D program manager for climate change, but I didn't start out that way. I started out as a nutritionist, so starting out with biology, moving into nutrition, and then joining industry. And then over the time in my industry, for the past 10 years, I've worked on the kind of midway between sustainability and nutrition and what that means for a company like ours from an R&D sense. So for me, it's been a real chance to bring my personal feelings on sustainability to bear. I think I joined Friends of the Earth at 15. So for me, it's always been a personal passion. And so to bring that together with my academic background has been really cool.
Where does the desire to be a nutritionist come from? Is that like you're just fascinated by food? What is it? Is it science? What bring that to life a bit for us?
For me, I wanted to help people. My first project in nutrition was to go to Nigeria and work with kids with malaria and vitamin A deficiency. So it was a chance to really make a difference to people's lives through nutrition. And what we start to see now is that it's not enough just to work on nutrition, right? We need to bring in the more complex picture of what it means to be part of the food system. And so that's why this shift and to bring that nutrition part into sustainability has been such an interesting area.
I've often heard the food system get described as kind of the mother of all systems, like it's a huge macro challenge, and the people in the circular design team here at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation often talk about this notion of zooming in and zooming out, that ability to zoom in to specific users or individuals or communities to solve problems, but then the ability to kind of zoom out, and kind of what you were describing there, the ability to zoom out and look at the whole system, which is a kind of slightly new skill for those of us who are working in this world.
It is. And I mean, I come from the training of doing clinical trials where you want to make a change. And so you control the system and you make a change and you expect, if you give A, then B will happen. But that's not systems thinking. Systems thinking requires you to take that step back and really understand that interconnectivity of how all these things start to work. And what we see now is that universities are starting to put training in place now for students in systems thinking. So it doesn't matter what sort of background you have, if you have that layer of systems thinking on top, that's going to be really, really valuable for us moving forwards.
So Nestle over the last 5 years, probably longer, have come out with a range of commitments on being climate positive, on being regenerative. What does that mean for you and your role and how Nestle designs its food products?
Yeah, so it's really important that we start with understanding the impacts of what we're trying to make. And so, this hasn't changed for us. We've been doing this for about 10 years now and really understanding the impacts of the products that we want to change. And so we have tools and we have methods in place to try and make that happen. But the very first thing is understand your hotspots. So take your product and do an analysis, understand where you can act, what you can change, where you should focus, because there's so many different things that you could change. So it's really important that we really focus down on the key first steps for that particular product. And that's particularly in the case of renovation. So every one of our products comes up for renovation regularly. And so it's a chance to really make those changes as part of a standard renovation cycle as well. So it means that no product is static over time. And so the very first thing we look at is the recipe, because we know that 2/3 of our impact as a company is our ingredients. And so we can really pull apart that recipe and understand where those impacts are coming from. For us, we use some really key ingredients that are probably not going to disappear out of our portfolio. So coffee, cocoa, dairy, these are really key ingredients for us. And so that means you've got to go into the field. You can't replace them necessarily. You can't necessarily always change them. So we have to go into the field and really do that. And so what's been changing for us recently is bringing more science to bear about what happens in the field. So we've got some really interesting research going on in dairy, for instance, to understand what technologies we can bring into the field to reduce the emissions of the cow, and then the resulting milk. And for coffee and cocoa, we do a lot in plant science already. So really understanding what's behind a successful coffee or cocoa plant and making that as efficient as possible. So we use the least amount of land and least amount of inputs for that. So now we can, we really bring that to bear to make sure we have the least impactful key ingredients of all. But that's for the key ingredients. For the other ingredients, of which we have many other thousands of ingredients, we really have to consider what we can do to change those or replace those or also make those least impactful.
In the Foundation's latest report, the Big Food Redesign, we talk about how do we make nature-positive food the norm, and explicitly talk about how do we design with nature as opposed to kind of working against nature. One part of that is how do we make the most of what is grown, and I know that Nestle have done some work on that. What does it look like to design food products working with nature versus against it?
So we have a chocolate called Incoa, which is 100% from the cocoa pod. So it's using, obviously, the cocoa beans, but it's using the white that surrounds the cocoa beans within the pod and using that to create the sweetness as part of the chocolate. So all of it only comes from this. And it's a chance to show that we can use these types of side streams. And it's a nice kind of win because the farmers, we also get to pay them for that extra ingredient as well. Something that might have necessarily gone to waste or maybe just composted. This way we can try and keep it in the food system. Other aspects are things where you maybe create a brand new product with that side stream rather than trying to put it into the same product as the original plant. So that would be an example of something like cascara, which is the berry that sits around the coffee bean, the red berry. Normally, this isn't really valorized. Occasionally, it's composted. Sometimes it's even an environmental detriment when it's not really treated properly. And so if we can bring that back in, we've been making drinks with it. It's a berry, so we can make drinks with that. It has got a nice kind of fruity, refreshing taste. So it's a chance also to innovate brand new products, things that we wouldn't necessarily have made before.
And there's something about, if you're taking Coa, there's something about the story of that product that helps you in the communication with the end consumer of that chocolate that you then learn as kind of a constant dialogue, I guess. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, I think it's really great. It's a chance to really talk to people about how their food is grown and where it comes from and who makes it. I think that linkage back to the farm, that feeling of being, of shortening that distance between where you are and where the farmer is and creating some more knowledge with consumers. I think it's a great opportunity to teach more about the food system and make more transparency.
Is this a business opportunity for Nestle? Because I guess there are some aspects of this, like developing new products presumably costs money, maybe working with farmers who are changing their farming practices. There might be, at least in the short term, some extra premiums on that type of farming. But is Nestle approaching this from a kind of, this is also a business opportunity for us, as well as obviously the other benefits that come with it?
I think for us, it has to be a business opportunity. For us, if we don't change, there's a really huge risk in not changing. And I think as long as you understand what is coming down the line, most businesses will recognize that they have to be part of this journey. And I think with going first, there's always risks, but there's also great opportunities with that. A chance to really explore new things, a chance to trial new products really quickly. I think that's something that we're also trying to do is get new products out quickly. And then we can understand if consumers are interested in these types of things as well. So it's not that we want to take far too long to make these sort of changes happen. If we can innovate, get pilots out, get new products out really quickly, get people interested and moving in this area, the opportunities really will come from that as consumers start to understand more about their food and what they want to look for in that.
As an individual, what do you hope your impact will be in this space in the next 5 years or so?
On one level, I guess I would like my job to become obsolete. I mean, my reason for my job is to get this change to happen, is to really fundamentally embed it in what we're trying to do. And so it becomes just a normal part of the way of working. And so if I've done my job right, then I wouldn't need to do it anymore because it'll be so embedded in our day-to-day life. The personal impact I'd like to have is that, the products that go out of our door are doing good, not just doing less harm, but actually doing good. And to me, that's the main goal that we want to aim for, and certainly for me personally.
I think that's a great ambition level to end on, that idea of we want to actually do more good and create positive impacts in the world. This isn't just about mitigating negative effects. Karen, thanks so much for joining us on the Circular Economy Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there are clearly some big challenges in making this shift, and Karen was talking about just a few of them there. And also, it's obviously not only retailers and food manufacturers have a role to play here. This next clip will just show one example of a community innovation-led farming project in Sao Paulo to give a flavour of some of the other things that are already happening across the world.
São Paulo tem uma singularidade que é a zona rural, justamente. A gente está falando de um recorte de zona rural sul de São Paulo, que é uma zona de mananciais hídricos que abastece 1/3 da população de São Paulo. Então você precisa pensar na conservação ambiental dessas áreas para continuar com essas águas. Você tem uma questão de vulnerabilidade social e uma possibilidade de um consumo local para essa produção que nasce aqui, nesse território.
Comprar de Parelheiros e da Cooperapas, que é a cooperativa existente no sul de São Paulo, é muito legal. É muito diferente do modelo de compra que os outros restaurantes têm. O Rutella é um restaurante situado na Vila Madalena, em São Paulo. É um restaurante que eu gosto de falar que é comida de produto. Quem dita o que está no prato não sou eu. Não sou eu que ligo para o agricultor e falo, ó, preciso de morango, de framboesa e de cogumelo shiitake. É um caminho inverso. Eles mostram aquilo que eles estão produzindo. A partir daquilo que eles estão produzindo, a gente vai montar o nosso menu, o nosso cardápio.
A do Local é uma empresa de delivery de comida saudável, orgânica, que vem de uma produção familiar e é preparada por mulheres empreendedoras em Paraisópolis. Os pedidos para os agricultores de Parelheiros são feitos a partir de uma lista dos vegetais disponíveis naquele momento.
A gente recebe uma lista 2 vezes por semana, com cerca de 30, 40 produtos, e essa lista é o reflexo daquilo que está sendo plantado. E cada semana é uma semana, cada semana tem um produto novo. A gente tem que mandar o pedido com 24 horas de antecedência, ou seja, eles vão colher aquilo horas antes de chegar no restaurante. Eles chegam em caixas, a granel, fora de plástico. Os legumes, as folhas, as ervas chegam vivas. Você consegue ver, parece que ela tá na terra ainda. E é muito bacana que você sabe que o dinheiro que você está pagando vai para o agricultor. Você vê que tem famílias por trás do alimento. Diferente da maneira convencional que se usa para comprar ingredientes, que você não tem a transparência, você não tem o traceback, você não consegue saber para onde está indo o seu dinheiro, quais são as práticas dessas pessoas. Você vê que a proximidade é ganha-ganha para todo mundo.
Se a gente quer produzir algum tipo de revolução, basicamente a gente tem que olhar desde a base produtiva até os consumidores, como que a gente faz para produzir uma relação virtuosa em todos os campos, tanto para quem produz quanto para quem consome.
É preciso juntar os atores corretos, é preciso articular, pensando quais são as possibilidades dentro de uma cidade do porte de São Paulo, quais são as políticas que precisam ser direcionadas para que isso funcione. É uma revolução possível, sim.
So it is possible to make nature-positive food the norm, and large retailers and food manufacturers play a pivotal role in making that happen. Thanks for watching this episode of the Circular Economy Show. Do make sure you tune in to future weeks, check out upcoming episodes on our website, subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notified every time we go live, and we'll see you again on the Circular Economy Show.